I still remember the night. Everything changed for me. My name is Daniel, and if you had seen me as a boy, you would have thought my life was perfect. I was born into a wealthy family, the kind of family that everyone in town envied. Big house, fancy cars, people bowing when my father walked into a room. From the outside, we looked untouchable. But inside those walls, there was something ugly, something you couldn't see unless you lived there. Everything in my family was about power and money. Love didn't matter. Dreams didn't matter. Only wealth and reputation mattered. I grew up quiet, always the one who questioned things, who wondered if there was more to life than gold-plated doors and expensive wine. But questioning my family was dangerous. My father was the kind of man who believed he was always right. My mother, well, she only cared about appearances. And my siblings, they were like clones of my parents, already being groomed to chase money and status at all costs. I was the odd one out, the one who didn't fit the mold. Then came the night of my 24th birthday. They called me downstairs to the living room. My father sat there in his tailored suit, my mother beside him, smiling with that look that wasn't really a smile. And sitting across from me was a young woman I had never seen before. She was dressed in luxury, diamonds on her fingers, a designer bag on her lap. She looked at me like I was just another business deal. "Daniel," my father said, his voice calm but firm, "this is the woman you will marry." At first, I thought he was joking, but then he continued. He spoke about her family's wealth, their business empire, how a marriage between us would make both families stronger, richer, more powerful. He said it like it was all already decided, as if my heart and my life didn't belong to me, but to him. I looked at her. She didn't smile, didn't show even a spark of interest in me. She was there for the arrangement, for the deal, not for love. My chest felt heavy. I knew I had to speak. I cleared my throat and said, "I can't do this." The room froze. My father's face darkened, my mother's jaw dropped, and that girl raised an eyebrow like she was offended. "I can't marry someone just for money," I continued. "I want a marriage built on love, not on business deals." That was it. My words were like gasoline on fire. My father slammed his hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "You ungrateful boy," he shouted. "Do you know what you're saying? You're throwing away everything we've built for you." My mother hissed under her breath, telling me I was humiliating them, that people would laugh at our family if I refused. But I stood my ground, even though my legs were shaking. I said, "I'd rather be poor and free than rich and trapped in a loveless cage." That was the moment my fate was sealed. My father pointed at me like I was some stranger. "Get out," he barked. "If you refuse this marriage, then you refuse this family. You're no longer my son." I thought he was bluffing, but he wasn't. My clothes were packed in a bag that night. My credit cards were cut up and thrown at my feet. My siblings stood there watching, whispering and smirking. One of them laughed and said, "Let's see how long you last before you come crawling back." It was the most painful walk of my life, leaving that mansion with nothing but a small bag and the weight of humiliation on my shoulders. I was no longer Daniel, the son of a rich man. I was Daniel, the nobody, the outcast, the failure. But deep down, as much as it hurt, something inside me knew this was the beginning of something bigger. That night, I walked away from everything I knew, not realizing that the same family who mocked me would one day be the ones knocking on my door, begging for my help. Friends, before I go further, let me ask you, where are you watching this story from right now? Drop your location in the comments, because I'd love to know how far this story reaches. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because the journey I'm about to share is one you don't want to miss. It was almost 10 years after I walked out of my family's mansion when my phone rang one evening. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, and for a moment I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. When I picked up, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. It was my sister. Her tone was shaky, almost desperate. "Daniel, please. We need your help." For a moment I froze. My sister, who once stood by and laughed as they threw me out, was now on the line begging. She went on to explain that everything had collapsed. My father's businesses had failed. Bad investments, betrayal from partners, debts piling higher than they could pay. Everything was gone. The mansion had been sold, the cars repossessed, the respect and power they once flaunted stripped away. They were living in a small rented apartment, barely surviving. I didn't say much on the phone. I just told her I'd think about it. But inside, my heart was pounding. Fate had done what I could never have planned. It had brought the mighty down low. The same family that disowned me was now reaching out because I was their only hope. Part of me wanted to laugh, to tell them to taste the pain they had forced on me. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger over the years, knew this was a test of my own character. A week later, I agreed to meet them. When I walked into that tiny apartment, I almost didn't recognize them. My mother, once always polished with diamonds around her neck, looked smaller, her eyes tired and red. My father, the man who once barked orders like a king, sat in silence, his shoulders hunched, his pride broken. My siblings, the ones who mocked me, now looked at me with something close to shame. For the first time in my life, they weren't above me. They weren't mocking me. They were silent, waiting. "Daniel," my father whispered, barely meeting my eyes, "we need you. You're our only hope now." That moment was surreal. I remember the night he told me I wasn't his son anymore. I remembered the laughter, the humiliation, the pain of being thrown out. And now here he was, a man with nothing, calling me son again. I could feel a war inside me. One part of me wanted revenge. I could have walked out and left them to suffer. I could have given them the same silence they gave me all those years. But standing there, looking at their broken faces, I realized something. True power isn't in revenge, it's in rising above it. They had chosen money over me. They had laughed at my pain. But I had become something greater than they ever imagined, and I didn't need to prove it with cruelty. I chose to help them, not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to show them what true strength looked like. I cleared their debts, found them a modest home, and gave them the means to start over. But I made something clear. I wasn't doing it to win their approval, nor was I doing it to restore the past. I was doing it because I refused to let bitterness define me. The look in their eyes said it all. My father couldn't believe the son he once rejected was now his savior. My mother wept quietly, whispering that she had been wrong. My siblings, for once, had nothing to say, and as I stood there, I realized something powerful. I had gotten the last laugh, not by destroying them, but by becoming someone they could never break, someone they could never ignore again. So yes, my family chose money over me. They disowned me, mocked me, and left me for dead. But life turned everything around. I worked, I built, I rose. And in the end, the same family who thought I would crawl back came crawling to me instead. That was the day I knew I had truly won. Friends, let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have helped them? Or would you have walked away and let them suffer? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear what you would have done. And before you go, make sure you subscribe. More stories like this are coming, stories that will remind you that no matter how hard life knocks you down, you can always rise and rewrite your destiny. When I walked out of that mansion with nothing but a bag of clothes, I thought I had hit rock bottom. And maybe I had. The first nights were the hardest. I went from sleeping on a king-size bed with silk sheets to lying on the floor of a tiny one-room apartment that I could barely afford. The roof leaked when it rained, the walls were stained, and sometimes the electricity would cut off in the middle of the night. There were days when I went to bed with nothing in my stomach but water. I won't lie to you, it broke me down. There were nights I cried quietly, wondering if I had made a mistake walking away. But every time those doubts crept in, I remembered the look in my father's eyes, the smug grins of my siblings, the way they called me a failure. And that pain became my fuel. I took whatever jobs I could find. I swept floors, carried bricks on construction sites, and even sold bottled water on the streets just to make a few coins. People who once recognized me as the son of a wealthy man now looked at me with pity, some with mockery. But little by little, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to let life break me. If I was going to be a failure, it wouldn't be because I didn't try. One day, while I was working at a construction site, an older man who owned a small building company noticed me. I was the youngest worker there, but I never complained, never cut corners, and never showed up late. He pulled me aside one afternoon and asked, "Son, why do you work so hard?" I smiled and said, "Because I've got nothing else but this." He nodded, and for reasons I didn't understand at the time, he saw something in me. He started teaching me. He showed me how contracts worked, how money flowed in business, how to spot opportunities others missed. He became like the father I never had, a mentor, a guide. I worked for him during the day and studied at night. I borrowed books from libraries, watched free lectures, and soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Slowly, I saved money. It wasn't much at first, but every coin I saved gave me strength. After years of hard work, I took a leap of faith and started a small business of my own. It wasn't easy. I failed more times than I can count. But with every failure, I learned something new, and with every lesson, I grew stronger. Eventually, the business took off. Then I started another, and then another. What started as survival became success. My name began to circulate, not because I was born into a wealthy family, but because I had built something from the ground up with my own two hands. The same people who once pitted me began to respect me. I had no mansion yet, no fleet of cars, but I had peace of mind. And more importantly, I had dignity. I remember walking past that old mansion one day. My father's cars were parked out front, the gate guard stood tall as always, and everything looked the same. But something inside me had changed. I no longer felt pain or bitterness. I didn't envy them. I didn't even wish to be back inside. Instead, I smiled because I knew the tables were quietly turning, even though no one else could see it yet. As the years passed, my businesses grew bigger, my investments smarter, and my influence stronger. I was no longer Daniel the outcast. I was Daniel the entrepreneur, Daniel the man people came to for advice, Daniel the man who had carved his own path. Yet through it all, I never heard from my family. Not a single call, not even a message. In their minds, I was still the one who had walked away from their plans, the one who had ruined his life. If only they knew how wrong they were. Life outside of their world was tough, but it was real. Every coin I earned was mine. Every success came from my sweat. And I knew deep down that the same family who mocked me would one day see me again. Not as the failure they once disowned, but as the man they wished they had supported. Friends, I'll stop here for now. But before I continue, let me ask, where are you watching this story from right now? Drop your location in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you're not yet subscribed, hit that button now, because the next part of my journey is where everything changes. The people who abandoned me, mocked me, and left me for dead would one day come begging at my door. And trust me, you don't want to miss how it all unfolded.